Welcome to the Hollywood Outsider, an award-winning weekly entertainment podcast, always available on your podcast app of choice or at thehollywoodoutsider.com. And this is your host, Aaron Peterson, and I'm going to talk about Tenet here in a minute. But before we get there, I have to talk about another film that is probably going to go unappreciated because it's coming out at the end of the year. Wonder Woman's about to come out. Tenet just came out on home video. A lot of other films are now in circulation and people are watching holiday films, but independent films are always hard to get the word out on, especially when you find a great one. Now, I've found several great ones throughout the year. You've heard me talk about them throughout the year, and please go back and find those films. But one that just came out is called Hunter x Hunter. And I can't even explain a whole lot about why this movie is great because I don't want to spoil anything. Please don't watch the trailer. Please, this is one I just ask you to take my word on it because a lot of information is given in the trailer and things that I wish wouldn't have happened. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the description to you. Joseph and his family live in a remote wilderness as fur trappers, but their tranquility is threatened when they think they are being hunted by the return of a rogue wolf, and then Joseph leaves them behind to track it. Now, there's a lot more to the story. There's a lot more that happens in the film that description does not address. The trailer perhaps will give you a little bit more indication of what's going on, but I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to tell you is why this movie appealed to me. I'm an avid backpacker. I've gone backpacking for many, many years of my life. I've talked about it on the show before. I'm not a hunter though, but because I've perused the outdoors so often, I've definitely run across many hunters and we've had many talks, and many of the things that to survive in the wilderness are also applied when you're hunting. And what the film does is it's a wonderful examination of the process of hunting, living off the grid and actually preparing bait, setting a trap, knowing exactly where to position yourself or how to position yourself to catch your prey, to understand that. And as Joseph goes, he's teaching his daughter, Renee, who's played by Summer Howell, about how to survive because they want to live off the grid continuously. And his wife, Anne, who's played by Camille Sullivan, who does a fantastic job. She has the strongest arc in the film. But she's basically deciding, does she want to get off the grid? Does she want to take her child back to civilization and get away from this wilderness lifestyle that they've been living? Because while her and Joseph chose this life, their daughter didn't get to choose, and she figures that she might be missing out a little bit in life by not partaking in civilization as we know it. So much of the film is about setting traps and hunting and who is the hunter in this situation. And there's so much more to the movie that I can't tell you about, but I will tell you the performances are extraordinary. Devon Sawa, who many people will remember as Final Destination, Idle Hands, he was the young kid who was in a lot of stuff, but he's a strong actor and he does a great job here. He's almost unrecognizable, honestly. Nick Stahl shows up as well. There's a lot of talent in this film that I really want people to check out, and I'm trying so hard not to tell you anything about it. But it is intense. Here's why the movie works. It's one of those films where it starts as a little bit of a slow burn as you're understanding the world. What is going on? They're laying the foundation. They're letting you know the characters, the surroundings, like they're living in this basic wilderness, like away from civilizations, almost like The Village. But the movie doesn't suck. Haha. Yeah, that's a dig. And so it's them going about their lives and also being fearful because a wolf is a dangerous animal, and they do approach that from an accurate stereotype. Wolves are one of the most dangerous hunters in the wild. But again, there's more to the story that I don't want to tell you. I just want you to experience it. And as the film goes, the tension continues to get ratcheted up until the very end when it has your stomach completely in knots. And I found myself screaming, absolutely screaming at my television because I was watching it at home. Absolutely screaming. And those are the kinds of films I don't get very often. I've watched so many movies. It's really hard to surprise me, which I was surprised several times here. And it's very hard to get me to where I have to look away from the screen or I'm genuinely shocked at what I'm seeing. And this movie has all of that. And it continues. It is a masterful ratcheting of tension as the film goes and might have just landed on my top 10 of 2020 spot. That's how good Hunter x Hunter is. It's better than Tenet. I'm telling you that right now. you're looking forward to Tenet, you're excited to see Tenet, and I don't blame you at all. But if you want to know what's better, Hunter x Hunter is better. Sean Linden wrote and directed it. I look forward to whatever this guy does next because beautifully done. Absolutely beautifully done. Camille Sullivan was fantastic. All of the actors were great, but she has, like I said, the strongest arc. And oh man, I'm still in knots from watching this movie. I really hope you guys check Hunter x Hunter out. It's on video on demand right now. You can rent it, watch it at home and safely at home, and then get scared to death to look out the windows. And you'll probably not want to go camping anytime soon, but it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And if $10 is the full price of admission, I give it $8. Definitely check out Hunter x Hunter. Now, let's move on to Tenet. Now, back in September, when Tenet actually debuted in theaters, we actually had a spoiler cast as part of an episode, but many people did not see the film in the theaters at that time, and rather than have you go search through your feeds to try to find it, Tenet has been released on Blu-ray, DVD, 4K, on demand and everything else. So now everybody has the opportunity to see it at home. We wanted to make it easily accessible since we're off for Christmas week anyway. We wanted to give you easy access to find the Spoilercast and be able to hear our thoughts and see if you guys feel the same way. So for this episode, you're going to hear our spoiler-free thoughts on the film, basically our review. And then we're going to jump into the spoilers and the inverted time and everything else having to do with Christopher Nolan's mind of a film. Obviously, I'm your host, Aaron Peterson, and it's primarily Amanda Sink, my fellow co-host, and I that do the review. John Davenport does pop on here or there, but I hope you guys enjoy this because it's really like a condensed version of a previous episode and just kind of brought back into the feed so you can partake in our spoilery thoughts because everybody now has the opportunity to finally see the film safely and securely at home. We wanted to make sure that you could easily find this. So I hope you enjoy this. We're going to get right into it. Starts with a spoiler-free review and then jumps to the spoilers. So if you just want to know if the movie's any good, just listen to the first portion and then we jump into the spoilers. It's all connected though. So, if you've already seen the movie, you're going to want to hear all of it because it's all connected. And you know what I wish we would have done now that I'm thinking about it? We should have done the podcast backwards just so it made sense and you could connect it into the film itself. And then maybe while we're talking, I just add a little here and there so you didn't have any idea what we were talking about. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I mean. All right, so let's get into our spoiler-free and then spoiler-y review of Tenet. Now, Amanda, we can finally talk about Tenet.
Spoiler-free.
Spoiler-free, and then we'll roll into some spoiler stuff. So
yes,
you guys don't have to worry. We'll just tell you if it's worth your time. Go ahead.
Yep. So armed with only one word, Tenet, and fighting for the survival of the entire world, a protagonist journeys through a twilight world of international espionage on a mission that will unfold in something beyond real time. I laugh because Robert Pattinson is in here in Twilight. And
we got it.
Okay.
We got it.
Hey,
so Aaron,
that's a good point.
It's funny.
It really is.
It was funny anyway until John ruined it.
Yeah.
This is Christopher Nolan's latest and I don't think you
Wait,
think
I
it's the
ruined
greatest.
it. You're the one who decided to describe your joke. You could have just left the joke alone, and it would have been so much better.
You're not wrong. So Nolan is doing his Nolaniest Nolan with the way he convolutes the story and messes with your mind.
Yeah,
did it feel like
Nolan.
too much, or did it live up to the hype for you?
It does. It does go full Nolan. I'm not exaggerating that. It's very complicated. You know what I will say? I don't think it's as complicated as people will probably make it out to be. Once the movie ends, I think it pretty much makes sense. It's not like Inception where you're like, what just happened? Like, you get it. But I do feel like there are a lot of times where he's almost just finger pointing at the audience going, you're not as smart as me, you're not as smart as me. And that can be it takes me out of it a little bit. That said, I mean, it's a weird concept. It's a very weird, it's almost like an indie movie with blockbuster budget. It just I'm shocked he got this approved for $200 million. I mean, once you see it and you see it play out, it's really like James Bond with time travel elements or inverted, whatever, however you want to see it. That's basically what it is. It's almost like this is Christopher Nolan finally got his chance to tell a James Bond story, and he told it, and he decided to put some Nolanisms in it. So he threw a little inverted time thing in there.
I would say, because you're talking about the James Bondy thing, and I think that's the action that comes in with the blockbuster. I feel like there's so much of the story that is traditional Christopher Nolan storytelling, but because he has the budget, he's like, well, I'm going to do this with a bit of a bang. So it's simple. It's simple once the movie concludes, but it is a wild path.
You will be
when you go down it.
Yeah, you'll be confused for many long portions of the movie, but it does come together like most of his movies do. I mean, whenever he has a puzzle like this, Memento, Inception, those are prime. Interstellar, which I didn't love that one, but the same thing. The puzzles come together at the end.
Even in Insomnia.
Yeah, even Insomnia. I mean, he loves to put a puzzle together. And that's what this movie is. And you get little pieces of it which is funny because as the movie starts, like the first half hour, they kind of give you a rough, quick example of how this works in the movie. You've seen it in the trailer.
They do, but it's so quick that you might even miss it.
Yeah. And then you start overthinking the crap out of it because of the things that happen. And then you get to the end going, wait, it really was that simple. I really should have just paid attention to the lady when she was talking. And I probably would have got this a lot quicker.
So overall, you enjoyed it, but there were moments that were...
Yeah. But I do want to say, like, you're like, it definitely, the story elements felt like Nolan. It felt like Nolan as soon as the movie opens and you're like, BAM! It was pretty quick. The action scenes were great.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to ask about the duo that we have on screen between John David Washington and Robert Pattinson, who is receiving a lot of credit right now, and we're familiar with John David Washington already, or notoriety, I guess, rather than credit. So what did you think of this duo?
Well, I think John David Washington is much shorter than his dad, because Denzel is 6'1". So, and he...
Oh my God. I don't know why I didn't put this together.
You didn't know that was his son?
No.
Yeah, that's his son, but he's 5'9", but I swear, I don't know what it is.
5'9" is not that short.
It's not that...
Even for a dude.
It's not that short, but for whatever reason, when Nolan's shooting him, he makes him look short. Like, there's several scenes where it looks like Kevin Hart.
You're so mean. It doesn't help that Robert Pattinson is like a good 4 to 5 inches taller than him. Like, almost
it's every
half
character. The actress, Cat is taller than him. Everybody's taller than him. Usually when you have movies like this, where you have, Tom Cruise is a prime example. They always cast him with short actors, or they put him on blocks or whatever the hell they do to make him look taller. They didn't do this. And so, like, there's several scenes where he's next to very tall people, and it's just obvious. But it doesn't matter. I mean, he beats some ass.
It doesn't. I don't feel like it affects the way you see his performance, or which can be distracting, because sometimes when you see that difference in height, and it takes you a minute to be like, oh my, I didn't expect this. Like, I just did not anticipate it. Like, when you genuinely understand how short Kevin Hart is, and you see him standing next to, like, The Rock where he could squish him with his toe, it takes you a second. I didn't feel taken back by this height thing. I didn't notice it as much.
It's just the way it was shot. It's not, I mean, he's not, I mean, he's 3 inches shorter than me. He's not that short. But I'm 6 foot, I'm almost as tall as his dad. In terms of the duo, I thought they were really good. I mean, I think John David Washington is a great actor. I think he's really got presence, and he carries himself well. He's got it. The it thing, not as much as Papa, but he's still got it. Robert Pattinson, I liked since he left Twilight. I mean, as soon as he stopped doing Twilight, I've enjoyed it. And just to go to where John was bashing your joke, it's really funny because in the movie, like, the thing that they tell you to it's kind of like a code phrase is, we live in a Twilight world. Well, that's distracting when you know Robert Pattinson's in the movie. So, like, the first time you hear it, it's like, you just giggle. Like, I can't take that phrase seriously, and he should have known better. He should have made it anything else. Like, it just, every time I heard it, they always meant it very serious, and you were supposed to take it very serious. And every time I'm like, it's funny.
So I have another question for you, and this is not my final question, but it's one that I feel like I have to ask you, and we'll keep it brief. Okay. So this is only because it's come up in conversation, and I really just have to get to the bottom of it. Did you feel like there was a sound mixing or some other sound issue with The Dark Knight Rises when it came to Bane, where you couldn't understand him?
The Dark Knight Rises or this one? The
Dark Knight Rises. Just hold on, I'm getting there.
Oh, yes. Sometimes it not as bad as in this one, though. This one was very distracting.
So in this one, did you feel like it was more the sound editing, or did you feel like it was more there are a lot of accents, which is great because it's a very diverse cast. However, it is not, I feel like it's not easy on the American uncultured ears.
I think there's probably some truth to that, but I will say, because I noticed this very early on, and it was a problem for me throughout the movie. Like there was several times where I'm like, I'd love subtitles right now. Like I would turn them on if I was at home because, Christopher Nolan, he shoots beautifully. I mean, and everything in this movie is very cinematic. He shoots this movie beautifully. It's wonderfully composed. The music is astounding. And just like most of his movies, music, thump, 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 thump through the whole movie. I mean, it permeates throughout the entire film. It's very well paced. Even though it's 2.5 hours, I was never bored. On the same token, because he always has this music and it keeps, like, he uses the music to create a mood, to create an intensity. It's very much a character in the film. It builds. And a lot of times when they're having very serious conversations, the music overwhelms the conversation and I can't make out everything they're saying. And that part was a little distracting, specifically in this movie. Like I noticed it right away. I'm like, that was not great mixing, because you should be able to, no matter where the music is, you should be able to make out, because these are important conversations, like pivotal plot points where you have to really pay very close attention and you can barely hear them. And that's not great.
See, I'm like partially deaf anyway, so it doesn't help. And throughout COVID, I've been using a tremendous amount of subtitles and relying on them a little too heavily at home. So I felt like when I was going to the theater, I was like, it's kind of a combination of that and the accents. But I noticed
are thick too. Yeah, they are.
They are, which is, again, I love it. But it's difficult for people who are not constantly listening to those different accents. And there's a lot back and forth. But yeah, I didn't, there were times where I guess I heard things a little clearer than others. And that's not usually the case. So I wondered if I was maybe in obscurity to it, because I've seen a lot of comments from people in the group even have noted.
I think you're going to hear a lot more.
So my final question is, between Inception, Memento, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, Prestige, Interstellar, and Dunkirk. So it's 8 of basically his greatest and most of his films.
Okay.
Where do you rank Tenet in this list?
Oh, man, that's...
So nine movies total. Where are you ranking Tenet?
I mean, I would put it over Insomnia and Prestige. I'm not a huge Prestige fan, so don't bash me there. But it's under Inception, Memento, the Batman films. It's above Interstellar, probably. Or at least it's close to it, yeah. It's somewhere, it's above the middle, but it's not at the top.
Fair enough, fair enough. So, I think I need to see it again. It's just one of those movies... Fair. Just because I feel like it's one of those movies where the first time you see it, you spend so much time trying to beat Nolan, because Nolan's going to Nolan you.
There is truth to that.
So it's like a competition in my mind, at least. And I'm like, where is this going? How is this going to conclude? What are the key objects? Like, I never focus on a film as much as I do when I'm watching his, and they're just so beautiful to look at. Mm-hmm. So but once I got to the end, as you mentioned, I was like, I think it's a great concept. And I think it was well done in the way that he presented it. Even as convoluted as it seems, it is like putting together a puzzle. I think that's a great way to explain it. But I wonder if a second viewing, I'm going to be like, I already know how this unravels. Does it still hold up?
Most of his films, I find, once you figure the puzzle out, it's actually still fun to go watch it, because now it makes more sense. Where I agree with you. The whole first time you were watching it, I was trying to put it together in my head. And now you know how the pieces fit, so you can just enjoy the movie. Yeah,
definitely. Mm-hmm. So if the full price of admission were $10, what are you giving Tenet?
I give it $7.
Okay.
Where are you at?
I gave it 8.
Okay, that's pretty good. You really enjoyed it.
I did.
Okay, guys, now we are into the Tenet Spoilercast. So I would recommend that you have seen this movie, or you just don't give a rat's ass if the shit is ruined, because we're going to talk about Tenet right now. Amanda and I are the only ones that saw it, so we kicked John's bitch ass to the curb, and it's us.
Bye-bye.
So let's talk about the spoilers. What did you think about the whole inverted time dynamic? Did you like this?
Surprisingly I did, because normally I'm not crazy about convoluted time travel where you have to keep track of all of the rules.
It's pretty convoluted. It is
very much so. And I think what gets me the most is looking at it going forward, their inversion, watching the inversion happen trips me up. And I know they explain it in the beginning and my eyes caught it, but I was like, how does logistically in my mind, I'm like trying to put together, okay, so it's in the past, it didn't happen, but then in the future, they needed to go back to change something. So then it changed, but then it's happening then in the other past, but we're all still in one timeline. Okay. So
exactly.
It just messes with your mind, time travel in general, but it was still a lot of fun. And I think a really clever way to put, science to this concept. Because, there's been some theory that there's a way that time travel exists, but not in the capacity that we think of it as on Earth. And this was a way to kind of transform that into a possible realistic option, which was scary.
Yeah, it was one of those things where as I was watching it, I got it as it went. You know what I mean? It started to get a little trippy because it really felt like it could only be, it was almost like Wanted where, you bend the bullets and whatnot. I'm like, so it's in your mind, but it is kind of in your mind, but I don't understand like how people.
It's intention.
Yeah.
It's all about intention.
Yeah. But the one thing that really, I guess I didn't really get, it's like, just so anybody can do it. Like anybody can do this because it really kind of felt like anybody can do it. Because he didn't seem very special at any point other than he's a gifted agent and he can whoop some ass, but he just really picks up and takes off with this thing. He sees it once or twice. He's like, all right, I got it. I'm like, I feel like there should be more training involved.
Well, and I think that's the thing is that anybody can do it. And that's a little bit what is scary about it. And it's not that just anybody can accidentally do it, because the whole thing that it keeps repeating is this concept of intention and of your actions actually progressing this to happen. So if you put your hand over the bullet with the intention to drop it, that's an intentional action. So the time just like mixes and whatever. But there's also that capacity of like, you have to have the right component with it. So the plutonium. So it can't just happen with anything anywhere.
Right.
It has to occur with that specific metal, right? That's a metal.
It has to be inverted metal.
Chemical.
Yeah, it has to be the inverted metal, which is, it's an odd concept. But okay, it's just one of those things where you got to roll with it. But what I did like about how they did it was they introduced it at the very beginning, and they introduced it as a very small portion. And then they gradually, as the film goes on, build and build and build. So, when he first figures out how it works, it's a bullet. It's a matter of seconds. And then as it goes, it becomes longer and longer until like you're in that final act where you've got him going back several days. And you find out at the very end that Robert Pattinson has come back from years earlier. So, it becomes like a much broader, grander vision as the movie goes on. And I really dug that because the first half of the movie, they don't really use it very much. They don't really use.
You see it in the very first sequence, though, because
you do because of that gunshot.
When you have that opera, when you're in that opera room, and then you see the hole close up of the seat on the seat, and then the bullet is like going backwards, so it's inverting, and he's like, what is going on? But it's so quick that I think people who are just sitting there starting to enjoy their popcorn might miss that moment.
Possibly. I feel like the camera did a good job of focusing on it. I'm like, wow, what was that? What the hell? The bullet came out? I don't understand.
Yes, but it's so quick that if you weren't looking at that moment, you could miss it. And then you're waiting all of this time to try to get your brain going about what's happening before they explain it to you. And they do a nice job of explaining it, and they give you a visual aid and everything, and that was cool. So,
and it's what I thought was great is all of the connections. They did a lot of rolling the film backward and whatnot, different scenes because of this whole time inversion thing. And then you'll get scenes where you have like a car that he was driving ends up on the road and flipping and whatnot. And it's played in both directions, both forward in time and back in time. And you also have him fighting himself, which was choreographed magnificently. Like that whole time you're thinking there's two different people. And because of the whole inversion and time element, he's playing with time travel so much. It's the protagonist, which that's his actual character's name, right? Everybody else gets a name, but he gets the protagonist. But he's basically fighting Neil, Robert Pattinson, and he's also fighting the protagonist. While he's doing both at the same time because of how this time issue works. It's a very cool concept. It really requires you to suspend disbelief for a big portion of it because
they unravel it nicely though, because even when you were talking about him fighting himself, they take it where it looks like you're fighting two guys. You see Robert Pattinson do the whole helmet thing and all of a sudden he's just gone and you're like, wait, what? Like you're just that's it? Because he obviously recognized something.
I knew he recognized it was either him. I thought it was him, actually. I thought he saw himself or something.
But then they backtrack it and they tell you that it had to have been one person. And so I was like, oh, well, then it must have, I was on the same thinking, like, oh, then it must have been like Robert Pattinson's character. And then they finally get to the point where it's like, oh, no, it was actually him. And you're like, what? So that was a nice reveal.
Mind blown. And Kick-Ass is in here too, and his accent's a little dodgy, but outside of that, it was pretty good. So
Aaron Taylor Johnson, right?
Yep. So was there anything in here you didn't understand? Like you walked out of it going, I do not know what the hell.
The only thing that I struggled with was keeping track of the timeline of events in order, because you have them played out for you. You have them played out as if they're the past, but then you also have them going back in time to change things. And so keeping track of all of those elements in the timeline was a lot.
Yeah, I needed a notepad. I'm like, wait, what? Okay. All right. I think I got it.
Even still, I'm kind of like, how does that? I have to watch it again just so I can focus on the timeline of events to understand. Because even his thing, the mission he was sent on, in the very, very, very beginning, and then he goes to that the little things floating in the ocean. What are those things called? Where he actually like lived inside of for forever.
Ships?
It felt like. No, not the ship. He didn't. It was before he got onto the ship.
The
it was while he was waiting. Yeah. And so that thing that's floating in the sea. That moment reveals to be as like a past moment too. And so I'm like the whole thing just like the timeline messes me up. I understand the actions. I understand the events and I understand how it all connects in the end. Mm-hmm. But keeping track of the order is like
very complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. I walked out going, I think they should just call it, the movie. But it does. I was getting, when you got to that final act, I was really starting to go, I'm like, man, I hope this is going to make sense soon. And then it really starts to come together. I'm like, oh, okay. Once you realize it was him fighting himself the whole time. And once you see like Kenneth Branagh's character do his little time back and forth, like that whole third act really put all the pieces together and made it all make sense, which is really funny. We got some set pieces, like repeat set pieces from different perspectives and different points of time, which I thought was a really clever way to do that.
Yeah, no, that was excellent. And it was the perfect way to reveal it to us because we were already familiar with it. And we're thinking of it as, okay, these characters have this action going on. And we know that they're going to be fighting these two guys in this vault area. So we're just waiting for them we're trying to get them to avoid each other.
Right.
And then you see him fighting himself while he's got the mask on in that room. And he gets stopped by his Robert Pattinson duo, the protagonist does, and you're like, holy shit, the protagonist was fighting himself. What? And like, that's the guy who snuck out. Like, it's a good thing he was able to get out because otherwise, not good.
I like how they use a comatose woman to go back into the building. I thought that was pretty funny. I'm like, are you just using her to get into the...
So I'm going to tell you something about that storyline with Kat that I was really... In the middle of it, I was real pissed off at Nolan.
I was very tired. The whole beaten housewife.
It was so tired. Yeah. The beaten woman. Like, I still don't think it was necessary. However, when we finally got to the end where...
She turns the tables.
she turns the tables, and all along the tables were turned. If you think about, like, then
woman.
going forward, all of the tables have been turned.
Yeah, the woman jumping off the ship, and it's actually
being her,
Yeah.
and that she killed him, and that's why he disappeared.
Yep.
But then going back far enough to, like, prevent him from being able to access the formula prevents all of the other stuff.
Right.
That was like, okay, I can at least handle that. But I was so mad because I was like, there is just zero reason to have the woman be continuously beaten, battered, and like show the weak woman perspective thing where he's like, you're not gonna shoot me, you don't have it in you, and she cries, and he takes the gun and beats the shit out of her.
Just
like,
very tired.
we don't need to see that. And I still think that it wasn't entirely necessary, but I at least appreciate that he had a different outcome for it.
Yeah, I mean, he took a tired concept and made it work, but I'll be honest, I mean, that was the weakest part of the whole movie for me. Like, whenever you have an agent and you have a cool concept like this, I just don't want, I'm doing it to save this woman. Like, the fate of the world is in your hands, and you're gonna blow it for one person. I always have a hard time with that kind of plot point. It bugs the shit out of me. That's
how I felt about Wonder Woman.
Because well, I don't agree with you on Wonder Woman. But I'll be honest, I mean, if I'm the protagonist, I let her die if it's going to save the world. I'm sorry.
Right.
I just do. And it's not even something that I would bat an eye on, because that's your freaking job. Your job is to save everybody, not just her. I'm sorry. Her predicament is awful. And it is awful. And I did I liked how he used the kid against her. Like, that was, okay, all right. But, turning the tables was pretty good. And Kenneth Branagh was a great bad guy. I think he was very good bad guy. He was. But there were moments where I'm like, I've seen this character in 47 other movies, and I didn't like him in those either. So I didn't like that element, that whole beaten housewife syndrome. I just feel like we should be past that. But it still ultimately worked. I more disliked that he's going to risk everyone in the world's life to save her.
Yeah, I did. So I thought it was really cool where he basically told the woman, and I had no idea what her name was, but it was like the Indian woman who was head of everything, the whole project. And he basically tells her, like, I'm coming back for you.
Priya.
And sure enough, he does.
Yeah.
So cool. And it was at the perfect moment, because I was wondering when that cell phone was going to come back into play. Like, it's obviously going to be used. It's just a matter of when will be the critical moment. And to have the two connected together, I thought was brilliant. I loved it.
So I want to ask, a lot of times when you're talking about a Christopher Nolan movie, you have at least one moment in the movie that, because of the grandeur, because of the cinematics, it stands out. I mean, you go in Inception, the revolving hallway is a great scene. You go to the Dark Knight, and it's the Joker out there on the street where he flips the Batmobile. I can name a bunch of scenes, at least one scene in every movie where you walk out of the theater going, that is iconic. Is there anything here that you felt was iconic?
The scene that comes to mind the most is when they are rushing the woman into their inverted time, and they're on where the helicopter's at, and they're rushing back inside, and they see that their former selves were fighting themselves, that they're now fighting the past them. And all that time, it was not other people they were fighting, it was themselves. That, to me, felt like the most iconic and revealing moment.
Okay. Mine would probably be where he comes back and we learn that he's both of the people that they were fighting. I thought that was the iconic moment for me. I'm like, okay, all right, that's something I'll remember from this movie. Every time I see it, or whenever I watch it, that'll be something that comes to mind immediately. Mm-hmm. So what about the action scenes for you with time travel, the daring do, like everything here? Do you feel like this is a typical Christopher Nolan? Like, do you feel like the action scenes were cinematic, deserved to be seen in a theater, blah, 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 etc.? Like they were kick-ass? Definitely. I mean, this is the Christopher Nolan movie with steroids because he has a steroids budget. Mm-hmm. So he's able to put a little kung pao into his scenes, because we've talked about this either in our spoiler free or earlier in the spoiler portion of the cast.
that this is a Nolan concept, and it's simplistic in a way, because once you get to the end, you're like, oh, okay, so really it is what it is. And people are who they are. Simple notion. But when you combine that with the boom that he had, and the action scenes and the effects and the music, I mean, everything was just it was so elevated. And there were so many moments where I was literally gripping like, whoo, okay, that put me on edge. It was tense. It was, invigorating, and I kept going, and my heart was pumping, and I was just encapsulated. I feel like this is something you have to see on screen. I would not have wanted to watch this for my first experience of it at home. I'm happy to see it again at home, but I want to see it 2 or 3 times in the theaters.
Oh, definitely. I the only thing I will say, I mean, positive, negative, I'm trying to be fair. Like, the action scenes were great, except I will say the very end where you have, their battle trying to get the pieces, and then you have her cat going against her husband. I found the cat versus husband far more riveting than I did we're just going to attack a building scene. Like, I just felt like that got a little bland there for a little bit. It finally got a little better.
The war zone, you mean?
Yeah.
Like that portion?
Yeah, that scene just felt a little bland. Like, I just felt like I've seen this 100 times. There's nothing new
Also,
here.
I did not follow that man's directions well enough, because I was confused. He gave all those directions for the military red and blue, and I was like, we got into it, and I was like, I forgot. Who's doing what now?
Yeah.
What's the directions again?
What's going on? Robert Pattinson's character's dead? What? What is going on? What?
I mean, there were great reveals in it, yes, but I agree with you. That moment with her husband, because we've connected with this character now, and we want her to get out of this horrible situation. And it's a trope because it's used and because it works. But we don't want her to be in this situation.
But I don't want him to save her. I want her to save herself, which is what she did.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And when you see that phone call, though, where he makes that phone call, and it's like, oh no, nothing's changing. He knows, like, things have already been done. And then she's like, screw it, I'm gonna kill you. And I was like, oh yeah, go girl. And then on the other hand, I was like, oh, but the whole universe, that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a very, very selfish action. But I mean, hey, that just proves she wasn't worth saving. Protagonist guy. Like, she's a selfish person, but she's also in a horrible plight and she's damaged. I get all that, but it was a great moment. And one thing I thought was really like a cool play with audience expectations is when he got the phone call, I think everybody assumed that he was being told that she was on the boat, but which he kind of was, but you felt like that was going to completely turn everything. But all it did was it planted a seed for his realization at some point, which he didn't come to that conclusion. He's like, oh, I don't know why. I guess I didn't give you credit for being smart enough to work this time angle, which is really what ultimately was his downfall. The score, I want to mention the score again, because it's a character by itself. We have a different composer to this. That's not Hans Zimmer. It's Ludwig Göransson, who did Black Panther. He's done other scores. But do you feel like his score measured up to the typical Christopher Nolan film?
It felt like a Nolan film. I mean, there were moments where I was so invested with the music subconsciously that I was more invested in that than I was, whatever they were talking about or anything like that, because it's just so compelling and it gets under your skin and into your mind, and it was beautiful. So no, I don't feel like this was much different. It met my expectation. Quite honestly, if you wouldn't have told me that, I would have just been like, oh, it's just done a little bit differently. Still worked great.
And I got to ask you, in terms of the film itself, do you think Christopher Nolan just saved cinema? Or this movie has the potential to save cinema?
Yes, people are going to want to go see this. People are going to enjoy themselves. It's going to get people back to the theater multiple times. It's going to get the triple cost when people want to go see Dolby or IMAX or whatever it is. It's worth it. And I want to point out one of the things that if you've been on social media, you've obviously seen me posting about this in our group and stuff, but one of the most amazing things that I thought came out of this film was the way that the cinematographer, which I'm going to try not to slaughter his name, Hoyte van Hoytema, Well,
I think you failed, but...
Hey, I Googled it. I listened.
Okay.
Hoyte van Hoytema.
Okay.
Or something.
I like it.
The way that traditionally lighting for filmmaking has been taught has been obviously for white individuals. And so the contrast is much different when you have somebody with darker skin tones, of course. But it's not traditionally taught how to handle those actors and make sure that you can have the cinematic background that you want with the proper lighting on your actor. And there's a moment when they're in the restaurant, and this is the moment that is perfect in my mind, and he's sitting there talking to Michael Caine. And behind him is this beautiful brown, they're in a really, really elegant restaurant, and it's a color that resembles closely to his skin tone, to John David Washington's skin tone. And in a lot of cases, they probably would have changed the background, or they would put a tremendous amount of light on his face to try to lighten his skin tone up and make it appear more. But instead, they were just simple and just understanding enough of their actor and their scene and everything that they had around them to do appropriate lighting on him, which made his skin look beautiful and still the same natural tone, did not change it, and just blurred the background and created this perfect... I mean, I don't know the technicality of it, but the lighting was just perfect for it. And Michael Caine did not have that blurred background, and it was normal for him, and that was an appropriate lighting for him and an appropriate background. And I was just really pleased to see that they were taking that into account and were doing it appropriately.
So this is like film class 101 for you?
No, because I'm not even giving you like technicalities because I don't know them. But it was just something that was so subtle, but I thought was just something that is a beautiful thing to notice.
You know what I noticed is that Michael Caine was in this movie for like 30 seconds.
Dude, what movie does he not show up in Christopher Nolan?
Well, I think it's required. I mean, he's legally required to be in all Christopher Nolan movies. I think it's part of his contract.
His life contract. He's like, do you want to continue living, sir? Because I have some crazy like time reversal methods here. I need you to sign this contract.
Well, you know, they do allude to, I guess I should answer the question. Save cinema. I think, you know, to really bring people back to theaters, you need a movie that people are going to talk about. And I truly believe that is a big reason why Christopher Nolan was holding off, because he knows he has a movie where people are going to be confused and are going to have questions. They're going to talk to their friends because that's the kind of movie it is. We see different things. And, you know, this has a very similar aspect as Inception and even Gone Girl. And in some respects is because you can create your own fan fiction when you walk out, because you've got the protagonist and, you know, Neil, Robert Pattinson's character, they have a history. They have a relationship for years, obviously. So you can put those things in your head, like write your own fan fiction about what adventures they get on. Think about maybe there's a sequel. I don't know. I mean, there's potential for a sequel. So
there definitely is. I mean, there was his story progressed further than we knew of by the end.
Absolutely. So yes, I do think, I mean, this is a movie that when I walked out, if you're still listening to this and you haven't seen it, I don't understand, but good for you. It's still a movie you have to see in a theater. And I don't care how frickin' fancy your home TV is, it will not compare. It does not compare to seeing this in a, I mean, I couldn't even imagine.
Nothing compares
to the
theaters.
Watching this, like, don't get me wrong, like Bill and Ted Face the Music doesn't feel like I have to see that in a theater. I just thought it would be a fun thing to see with friends. But this is a movie where the music, the lighting, the cinematography, the shots, the beauty of the action scenes, like the grand spectacle is cinematic. Everything about it is made for a movie theater, and it works better in a movie theater. And you'll walk out of there and you'll tell your friends that you went with, you'll talk about trying to figure out some stuff neither one of you figured out. You're still going to be trying to figure like, what is going on with this time shit? I don't understand.
Googling Tenet timeline.
Yeah. How did they go back years? I don't understand. And then he's still dead at the, what the fuck? He's dead in the same place. I don't understand. Like, all of these things are going to get you talking and talking and talking. And that's what can save cinema. Movies like that can save cinema.
And have safe cinema.
Woo!
Hopefully.
Thank you, Nolan. Thank you. All right. That's going to do it for this episode. Unless you have anything further to say about Tenet.
Go see it.
Bam. Remember, guys, next time you go to a theater, I already said it, but I'm going to say it again. Go see Tenet in a theater. Be safe. All that, as long as you feel comfortable, which I will tell you, we've all had plenty of experiences. We're all fine. Buy popcorn.
I have to ask you a question, though.
Oh, okay. Don't buy popcorn.
Wait to buy popcorn. Just a few seconds. Did you have a theater that stuck around after the ending while the credits were rolling to see if there was anything left?
Not for that one. I did for New Mutants, and I felt like I wasted my time, but I didn't for this one.
I wasted my time here, too, but there were a lot of people who were kind of hanging out waiting, and I was like, oh, this is the beauty of watching it at the movie theater with other people, where they're sitting around anticipating seeing more. And that's always a good sign to me.
Absolutely. You know what would have been really cool is to throw in some more time fuckery there at the end, Nolan. I mean, you had,
you had the opportunity.
You had the opportunity. What a great stinger where it's like, they're actually, none of this happened yet. Wait, what?
This was all in Cobb's dream from Inception.
Oh, man. It's like after the credits, like the top spinning? Yes! Why not? I'm gonna freaking superimpose that on my Blu-ray whenever I buy it. I'm going to get that in there. Bam. All right, guys, take care. We're out.